Hey, I'm Dave. Welcome to my shop. Today in Dave's Garage, the story of some hacking that ends in failure. But then I redeem it, kind of like Mythbusters at the very end, by using different hardware to just make it work the way it was supposed to in the first place. But along the way, I'm going to fail miserably with microcontrollers and reflashing of them and scopes and trying to hack stuff. Here's the story. So I saw these lights at Costco originally, and they're also available on Amazon.com, and they actually looked really attractive. They are solid glass, except for the rubberized wires from which they hang and everything that are pretty solid and heavy duty in their own right. But being solid glass really reminded me of the old glass insulators you would see up on power lines and stuff that my grandfather collected. So that's what caught my attention. And then when I realized, hey, these things are individually addressable. They're not just patio lanterns. I mean, this is what I do for a hobby, individually addressable LEDs. So how could I not grab a set? So I did. Brought them home and then realized, well, they probably got some terrible Wi-Fi control, which they do. And you run a phone app on your phone and it flashes red or green or it does whatever boring effects it does. Unfortunately, I was never able to get it to pair. And I'm not like some Wi-Fi guru, but I mean, I set up my own Unify system in the house. I know kind of what I'm doing. I knew to turn off 5 gigahertz and just run it on the 2.4 band. And I managed to join its own internal Wi-Fi, but then whatever the phone app is supposed to exchange with it privately, it never did, never paired, never worked. So then I really had a good excuse to go through, and now I pretty much have to rip it apart and put in my own electronics, right? And that's what I plan to do. My goal was to find out where the signal line was, cut it, and then insert my own ESP32 module with my own signal going into the lights. What are the odds this is going to work? Well, as you're going to guess, pretty low. But I figured, hey, they're probably WS2812B, which is the standard for most current addressable lights. I was a little worried because these lights really don't do much. I mean, out of the box, there's a button you can push and it steps through a couple of effects, which are, basic colors. And then you can go red, green, red, green, red, green, which I guess is Christmas. And you go red, white, blue, which I imagine is July 4th. And you have one sort of rainbow palette that's static and doesn't even move. And that's it. So underwhelmed is how I would describe my reaction to the internal effects. And that gave me all the more reason to want to do my own. So like I said, I figured I would just inject my own data signal and it would magically work. Well, not only was that highly presumptuous of me, I boned it the first time. What I did is I realized I need 5 volts. Internally, I found there was a 3-wire tap of ground, 5 volts, and signal. Ideal. So that gave me confidence that this was going to work because that's exactly what I need. So I soldered my 5-volt line to the 5-volt line, and I cut the signal line, and I cut the ground, and I tied those in. And yeah, that's right, I said I cut the ground. I don't know why I cut the ground. I should have tapped into the ground because now the lights don't have ground. Was I giving them ground or were they giving ground to me? It's not clear in that situation. There is no ground to be had. So I promptly hooked the ground back up, but I could still get nothing. So the LEDs have a mode when there's no signal going to them where they just flash and cycle through colors. And that's great because you can tell whether they're receiving anything. When I started sending my signal, they stopped doing that. It would just lock on what effect they were on and not do the no signal thing, but they wouldn't display anything. But try as I might, I could not get the lights to cooperate with WS2812B protocol. So they clearly just were not using that. I figured I've already got the thing connected. For the sake of just a recompile, I can try some other formats. I got carried away. I tried all 20 formats that Fast LED supports. It responded to none of them. So I realized at this point, either it's some wildly proprietary format that they're using, which I find probably to be the uncommon answer, or more likely I'm doing something electronically wrong, that it's just not getting my signal or can't respond to it because I'm doing something wrong. But I'm not a hardware guy, so I don't really know at this point. So I'll go get the thing that does know, my scope. It's a basic wriggle scope, and it's 100 megahertz, so it can certainly do this. Now, if you think a programmer like me equipped with a soldering iron is hilarity, then wait till you see me with a scope. And precisely because I don't really know what I'm doing, I did have some trouble capturing a good waveform up front. I eventually figured out how to set the latch and turn on a longer buffer so that it had room for the entire waveform, and I did get it to capture the waveform. And what I found was that, yep, sure enough, there's 8 bits. They toggle up and down. I didn't know which was 0 and which was 1 necessarily at this point, so I just wrote everything down as what I thought. I used short pulse was 1, long pulse was 0, wrote everything out, and what I got is an 8-byte header that went 001, 00000, and it did that 4 times. It inverted that pattern 4 times, and then there was a data stream of 00s and FFs, which looks like color data, because if you're doing all red or all green or all blue, that's what you're doing, FF. Now, the one catch with all of this is that I noticed it was not a 5-volt signal. It was a minus 5-volt signal. I don't even know what that means. I mean, I know what it means, that it's 5 volts, potentials, and so on. But why would they be using -5? And then I thought, well, it gives them the greatest potential difference from +5, so maybe that gives them better signal to noise. You really don't need that at 48 feet. They're using a big conductor in there for signal as it is. So no matter how much I stared at the color data, though, I just could not organize it into RGB. It just didn't make any sense, particularly in the context of the lights I was actually currently showing. I set it to the July 4th red, blue, white, and expected to see that color pattern, but did not. What did I see? Well, I saw FFs in the wrong place. Then I realized, hey, it's repeating every 24 bytes. And then I realized, ooh, actually it's repeating every 12 bytes, even better. So I've got a 3-light repeating pattern that runs for 12 bytes. You can do the math on that one in your head. There's got to be 4 bytes per light. So I looked at it with that in mind, and sure enough, there's an extra FF at the beginning on the white light, which tells me that that's just the byte that controls the white light that they've actually added to this. So they're individually addressable LEDs plus a white. So they're RGBW, or WRGB, depending on how you want to organize it. And that solved the mystery. So when there are 4 bytes per light, it worked out great. I wrote out the table. Everything looked reasonable and great. Now I just got to generate this waveform. Unfortunately, like I said, it's -5 volts. I've got no way to generate that coming out of the ESP32. In fact, I only have 3.3 volts, which is good enough for WS2812B, but probably not for this stuff. So I was prepared to do a level shifter and some other things, but I had no idea how am I going to generate a negative voltage. But then I thought, you know what, maybe it doesn't really care. All it cares is there's a voltage potential and that it generates a square wave, and if I get the waveform right, that it will just respond and do the right thing anyway. So kind of hoping against hope, I went with that in mind because I figured even if it didn't work that way, that I was going to have to write the code at some point. Might as well write the code first. So my goal then was to generate that exact same waveform I had seen on the scope and at least get the timing and the shape of the waveform right. Now, how was I going to do that? Well, the easiest way to do it on a microcontroller is literally to set the pin to 1, wait, set the pin to 0, wait, set the pin to 1, wait, and to generate your square wave. That, of course, wastes an entire core and is not the right way to do it. The next step up the ladder would be to use the PWM channels, or the pulse width modulators. What they do is they generate a square wave for you, and they let you control the waveform in terms of how long the duty cycle is on and off. But you can't do it unless you really timed it well, perhaps. You can't do it and modify the length of the pulses individually. You change them all at once. And so that's not going to help me. Even though it runs async and will be handy because it doesn't tie up the CPU core, it doesn't do what I need. But fortunately, the ESP32 has something that does. They're called RMT channels. What's an RMT channel? I think it stands for remote, and what I'm presuming it was originally for was to generate the square wave patterns that you need to in order to generate and produce IR signals as if you are a universal remote control. So if you have the right libraries, you can, using this chip and a diode, generate all the IR patterns that you want, and they actually run asynchronous to the CPU, and so you can set them to repeat and so on. And I know this approach will work because it's actually how Fast LED does it. And speaking of which, rather than writing it myself, I thought I've got all this infrastructure in Fast LED. What I'll do is I'll write the driver, or the chip controller, for Fast LED to drive these. That way I can leverage everything that Fast LED does, and I'm just going to do the communication layer. Now, the classes that they do expose don't have the right things virtualized for me, so I wound up copying and pasting about a couple hundred lines of code that I can rationalize later by making changes in the actual source tree to Fast LED. But for now, I've just copied a class and then modified it to insert the delays that I need, because one of the biggest differences between the data stream that you see coming out of Fast LED normally and the data stream that I saw going to these LEDs was that there was a gap before and after each byte, a rather substantial gap. Fast LED just packs every bit straight together, and in fact, other than the reset pulse, they're packed in there solid. There's no gaps. My problem was when I inserted the gaps, the chip would reboot. Well, that's not good. I'm pretty sure the reason is this is all done under interrupt, and if you give it too long of an operation to perform under interrupt, even though it's not really documented this way, it will then just reboot. So it's a pretty easy way to reboot the chip. Just say, hey, go do an RMT pulse for, longer than you should hold an interrupt, and boom. So if you can't do one long delay, can you do a whole bunch of short delays? Well, you probably could, but I can't just send extra zeros or ones or something like that. So what I did was I defined a custom pulse state that just always kept it low. Then I padded the data stream with a couple in front and a couple after. And then I realized there's no point doing that, so I just put them after. And looked at it on the scope. It wasn't as big a delay as I saw on the original, but it was a substantial delay that you could see, well, here's a byte, and over here's a byte, and then the next byte is way down here. which I assume is kind of what it needed. The problem came when I had too much data. If I had a lot of LEDs, and by a lot I mean 48, which is not a lot because a normal strand can have 1,000, but if I had all 48 LEDs and the gap pulses padded in there, again I was getting the chip to crash. I never determined why, but I found out that if I shortened the number of LEDs down to 32 or 16, it would survive. So there seems to be either a bug in the fast LED or the RMT code, or I'm misusing it in some way, that's causing the chip to reboot. So eventually I got to the point where I had convinced myself that even though my delay in between bytes wasn't as big as the original delay, it still probably is going to work. But I've got another probably in there, which is that I'm assuming this 5-volt potential is going to work, even though it's not a negative voltage. Well, I'll spare you the gory details, but I wasted a couple of days proving that those assumptions are not, in fact, true. At this point, I figured they wouldn't do the minus 5 volts if it didn't matter. It doesn't mean the chip couldn't respond to a positive voltage, but I'm going to have to try and generate this to see if it's going to work. All I know, not being a hardware guy, I know I need 2 rails now. I need like a 10-volt rail and a 5-volt rail, and I'll back the differential out of that somehow, and I'll send that as a negative voltage down the signal line, switching it off and on with a transistor. And that's kind of the level at which I understand it. Now, I don't have a 10 and 5-volt power supply handy, so I took a PC motherboard supply, and I have a breakout board for that, which gives me 12 and 5. And from there, I can get a negative 7 or a positive 7 as well. How do you get 7 volts out of a 12 and 5? Basically, you use the 5-volt power as your ground, and then the 12-volt power as your power, and the differential between them is 7 volts. And if you collapse that backwards using a transistor, you should be able to generate a negative 7-volt signal. Then I figured I could prune a little bit of voltage off that, going backwards through a diode or something. It didn't matter because I never got that far. I was able to generate a negative voltage potential using my meter, but I could not get a waveform that I was satisfied with on the scope. Eventually I realized that between the delay not being quite right and the voltage not being quite right, I had too many things stacked against me for this to really have a shot at working. I was going to have a friend make a house call and come and explain it to me, but it's a pandemic, so talked a bit by email, but I still never got it quite working the way I wanted. And then I realized, well, there's a chip in this thing. What kind of chip is it? I looked at it, and I did some Googling, and it turns out it's like a TYSE something or other, but that really comes down to it's an ESP8266-12, or a variant thereof. It's got a little Wi-Fi antenna built in, it's got the module is exposed, and there's no programming header, and there's certainly no serial port, but what if I could flash this thing? Maybe I could just write code out. And in fact, there's an LED controller chip in there that might be doing some of the translation for me. So I figured I'd take a shot at actually flashing this chip in circuit. It's not like I can pop this thing out and stick it in an EEPROM burner, and I can't just hook up a serial port to it because there's no serial port handy-dandy on the little board. But what I could do is wire to the actual RX and TX lines on the chip and use an FTDI TTL adapter that I actually had on hand in order to communicate with it. Then you plug your serial port into the adapter, and it has the TX and RX lines come out, and you hook those up swapped to the RX and TX lines on the chip. Ground and power, they should talk. So I found the TX and RX lines from the data sheet, and I wired little wires to those, and I found 3.3 volts and ground and GPIO 0. You're supposed to hold GPIO 0 low while rebooting the chip in order to get it into flash mode. What I didn't know until I found out much later is that some people say you also have to hold EN high. Not everybody says that, so I don't really know the right answer on that one, but I was not holding EN high. Long story short, again, I never got the chip to flash. So after monkeying with it for quite a while, I realized, well, wait a minute. This chip's not doing anything. It's not even running the LEDs anymore. Yeah, I caked it. I blew it up. It's dead. So why am I telling you all this if I never got it to work? Well, 2 reasons. First of all, I'll show you what I was hoping it would look like by using a set of individually addressable LED lights that are on a strand like patio lanterns but are not fancy glass. So I'll get the effect I was looking for, and I'll show that to you right away. So in order to do this properly, what I need from one of you, ideally, is a simple little circuit that I can understand, and I already have one thanks to some guys on Facebook, but I want to see other options. Is there a simple circuit that I can build using a PC power supply or something similar like that that will then generate a -5 square wave data signal based on the 3.3 volt square wave data signal that I provide out of the ESP32. All I need is for my 3.3 volt signal to turn into a -5 volt signal. You'd think that would be fairly simple. Doing with voltage offsets and all that probably should have worked, but I never got it to the point, and I don't know how to trim the 7 volts down to 5 with a diode. I know it can be done. So this is the kind of thing that you can confidently sketch and maybe even test on a little breadboard and send me a picture of the breadboard so I can duplicate it, and a little schematic. I would love that. Then I'll grab another set of these things, because I smoked this set rather badly, and I'll give it another shot, and I'll let you know how it turns out. So one thing you may have noticed, this episode was not rehearsed, it's not written down, it's not scripted, it's not all my regular stuff that I like to go through and do it the way I do it. However, I didn't think that a failure was worth scripting, so I figured I'd just do it off the cuff and see how it went. Let me know in the comments, is this bearable even though the project itself didn't turn out well? Is the format acceptable, or do you prefer the regular scripted type? Because this will take a lot more editing work, probably, but a lot less scripting work. It would probably give me the option to do more content more frequently if I could do it without that extra step. So, in the meantime, as always, subscribe if you're not already subscribed so you don't miss this kind of gem. Because I had nothing else to show for it, I wrote the code to transfer my flame effect onto the strand, which is really just tuning of the flame effect. I'll leave you with a quick look at what the flame effect looks like on a hanging strand. I apologize if this is like a vertical video. I just kind of took it on my phone while I was standing in the shop late at night. And then I realized, hey, that's the only footage I have of it actually working. So here you go. Thanks for joining me here in the shop. In the meantime and in between time, cheers, and I'll see you later.
This little chair will be waiting for one of you, and a rocking chair for another who likes to rock, and a big armchair for two more to curl up in. All next time on Dave's Garage.